So today we're going to start off with solving equations with a square on it. And this is to help us finish up those problems we started yesterday where we partially completed the square, but we didn't finish solving the entire equation for x. So look at number 4 in your do now. So that's the kind of problem we want to look at and be able to finish off by solving x and getting x by itself. So main thing we need to learn to get there is solving equations that have the power of 2 or have a square on them. So like if we ask ourselves, what if I had a number to the power of 2 and it equaled 100? So you would ask yourself, what number can I fill in this blank that would give me 100? Now, if you said the number 10, 10 is a number you could fill in here, which is correct. If you said 10, so you were correct. So in this case, the box would equal 10. Now, there's actually another answer. I'm going to just put it out here. What other number that, if I were to go ahead and put it in this spot, what else besides 10 would give me 100? So what number squared would also give me 100? So what else can I put in this space here that would also give me 100? So I'll give you a second to think about it. Now this is a one number that people don't generally think of automatically when they're thinking of a number squared. 10 is a common one we think of, but think of the opposite, like the other side of the number line across the 0, so in the negative direction. So your hint is it's a negative number. See if you can figure it out now. Now if you said negative 10, then that's the number, because a negative 10 times a negative 10 is 100, just like 10 times 10 is 100. So there are two options here, or two solutions that satisfy this equation. So when it comes to squares in an equation, you're going to end up having two answers. So just like if I were to say, what number squared equals 16, you could say, well, 4 squared is 16, but also negative 4 squared. So there's two solutions of positive of the number and the negative of that number. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, how to solve those types of equations. So when it comes to solving those types of equations, we look at how am I going to look at an equation with a square, going back to the one we had right now, and solve for x. So let's say I have an x squared equals 16. So what's a procedural way we're going to get there? So we're looking at this power of 2. So meaning what's going to get the x by itself, because we're not always going to have a nice number here like 16 or 100. So what's going to eliminate a power of 2? So we're going to think of opposite operations. So we know that the opposite of adding is subtracting, the opposite of multiplying is dividing, while the opposite of a power of 2 is the square root symbol. So squares and square roots are opposites. So for example, 7 squared is 49, and 49 square rooted goes back to 7. So these are opposite operations. So the square root is what eliminates the power of 2, and vice versa. So when solving an equation, when you have a square on it, so when solving an equation, and I believe this word should not be here, so cross it out. So when solving an equation with a square, we eliminate the square, so we get rid of that power of 2 by putting a square root. So we eliminate the square by putting a square root on both sides of the equation. So when solving an equation with a square or with a power of 2, we eliminate the square by putting a square root, its opposite, on both sides. Now the thing that this first section we were talking about was the whole plus minus thing. We want to make sure that we think about the extra answer, the negative answer. There's that positive answer like 10 and the negative answer, which is negative 10. So that's where our plus minus symbol comes in. That's why we've been seeing this symbol before, because it's going to come into play from now on. So let's look at this first equation. So the general idea is I'm going to just rewrite this equation. Later on, you'll be able to skip this step. Now what I'm going to do to both sides of this equation is I'm going to put a square root on the left side and on the right side, because that square root is going to eliminate the power of 2. So I'm allowed to cross them out. So the square and the square root will cancel out, and it frees up my x, or whatever's inside the square root. And the square root of 121 is just 11. Now, the only thing is, we talked about, there are actually two answers. There's positive 11 and negative 11. So we just do this. We're just going to get 11 as our answer. But there should be two answers, 11 and negative 11. So the way we remedy that is we put a symbol, which is a plus minus symbol, on this step. So whenever you put square roots on both sides, you have to put the plus minus on the side that has an actual number. One more time, whenever you put square roots on both sides of an equation, you have to put the plus minus symbol on the square root that has the number in it. So when you write out your final answer, it's x equals positive 11 or x equals negative 11. So I'm going to write that out separately. This is something you can skip, but that's what this top statement says. X plus minus 11 is the same thing as saying x equals 11 and x equals negative 11. So either one of these is perfectly fine as a final answer. You can write both, though. All right, let's go on to number 2. So we have x squared equals 121. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to rewrite it this time for the next one. I'm sorry, I haven't switched it yet. Let's get out of here. Let's go to number 2. There it is. So we're going to go ahead and put the square root on the left side and on the right side, not forgetting the plus minus symbol. The purpose of me putting that square root on the left and the right, it's the opposite of squaring, which eliminates. So we're left with x equals plus or minus. The square root of 24 is not a perfect square, so we're going to simplify that. I'm going to replace this for 4 times 6, which is 2 square root of 6. That's my final answer. I have two solutions, positive 2 radical 6 and negative 2 radical 6. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next problem. And here we go. Give it a second. There it is. Now this one's a little bit more on it. We have an extra number on it. We have that subtraction of 4 inside the parentheses with the power. Now, because that 4 is inside those parentheses, we cannot add 4 to both sides. So it would be wrong to do this, because that 4 is trapped inside of a square. So we don't do this. So we're going to go ahead and put the square root on the left side to get rid of the power of 2. And on the right side, not forgetting our plus or our minus. So squares and square roots cancel. They always will. And we have x minus 4 gets freed up. You can drop the parentheses. You don't need them anymore. Right side, we have square root of 9, which is going to give us just a 3. It's a perfect square. Now this one we have to get x by itself. Remember, my goal is x equals. So I'm going to take the 4 and move it from the left side and move it on over to the right side. Let's put it slightly to the right here. I'm not going to combine them yet. These cancel. And I'm left with x on the left side. Bring down my equal sign. And here we have plus or minus 3 plus 4. I'm actually going to write it backwards. It looks a little nicer the other way around. So I'm going to write it this way. Although you're more than welcome to write it like the order you see it. You can write it like this, but just comparing the two, the one on the right looks a little cleaner because there's less symbols. But both of them are correct. Hola. Sorry guys, I had to stop the video for a second and rewrite everything all over again. So let's just go ahead and finish this one off. So this says x is equal to 4 plus or minus 3. And I know how to do 4 plus or minus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's x plus equals 4 plus 3, which is my first answer, x equal to 7 from 4 plus 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and subtract them. So 4 minus 3 is going to give me a positive 1. So this is my final answer. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So next one, we're going to start off the same way. We're going to square root both sides, just like we did the last time. Put the square root on the left, square root on the right, because I want to eliminate that square root first. So I'm going to eliminate square root with square. And I'm going to have x plus 3 equals, and I forgot to put the plus minus on the 12. So let's make sure we don't forget that. So we're going to have this plus minus. But 12 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to simplify it to 4 times 3. You can't fit it in right where I'm putting it, just right off to the side. That's going to become a 2 radical 3. Now my next step is just moving the 3 from the left side to the right side. If you don't want to write it and just do it in your head, that's fine, or you can write it out. Preference is yours. These cancel. So we're going to be left with x equals, I'm going to put the negative 3 first, then the plus minus 2 radical 3. And that's my final answer. I can't actually add or subtract these unless I use a calculator. So this answer is perfectly fine as you see it. It's exact. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So I want you to try the next two on your own. Take a minute, pause it, and then come back and check your work. All right, so now that you've actually worked on these two problems, you should have gotten the following answers. X equals to 3 square root of 2. And there should be a plus minus on it, so make sure you put that plus or minus on it. So again, the second one, you should have gotten the following answer. You should have gotten x equals positive 10 plus or minus the square root of 22. So you cannot simplify the square root of 22 here, so it stays square root of 22. Just as a reminder, not everything simplifies. So if you cannot break it down with the perfect square, it does not simplify. So if you did this with it, or just that, that is incorrect because this is not a perfect square right here. Neither one of these is, so you cannot simplify it. All right, so go ahead and start the practice on the next page and do the error analysis at the bottom of the page.